Stone does not move unless the mountain commands it. I have sat upon this peak for 40 winters, listening to the wind speak the secrets of the void, but the wind has never screamed like this. My name is Sojun, and they call me the Iron Sutra because my skin is scarred by the lessons of the blade and my soul is anchored by the weight of the heavens. Below us, the valleys of Japan are drowning in a sea of violet light, but here, on the sacred spine of Mount Hiei, the battle is for the very breath of the world. They came from the zenith, not as falling rocks, but as a deliberate tear in the fabric of the night. They do not want our silk, our gold, or our land. They want the light behind our eyes, the resonance of the spirit that fuels the pulse of the earth. The first of the Aeon-Eaters descended through the mist like a nightmare made of brass and geometry. It was a rotating madness of rings and needles, hovering over the Enryaku-ji Temple with a sound that wasn't a noise, but a frequency that made the monks' teeth ache and their prayers falter. I stood on the roof of the great hall, my fingers gripped tight around the shaft of Raikiri, my naginata. The steel was forged from a mountain vein struck by lightning, and as the alien entity approached, the gold-etched sutras on the blade began to glow with a fierce, protective blue fire. Keep the chant. I roared down to the brothers in the courtyard. The sound is your shield. If the rhythm breaks, the mountain falls. The monks raised their voices, a subterranean rumble of OM that vibrated through the stone foundations. The sound created a localized barrier of air, a spiritual friction that slowed the descent of the mechanical soul siphons. These smaller drones, shaped like jagged, metallic lotuses, spun in the air, their petals opening to reveal glowing violet apertures designed to draw the essence from the living. The first drone lunged. I didn't strike with the blade, I struck with the mountain. I pivoted on the ceramic tiles of the roof, my naginata humming a low, lethal note. The sutrabane edge cleaved through the drone's brass shell as if it were rotted parchment. A spray of liquid mercury erupted from the machine, splashing onto the roof and hissing like 1,000 snakes. The drone didn't just break, it unraveled, its geometric components dissolving into a fine gray ash that smelled of burnt ozone. But the Aeon-Eater, the master entity, was not so easily deterred. Its central weeping eye fixed upon me, and the brass rings around it began to spin at a blurring speed. A wave of distorted reality rippled toward me. It wasn't a projectile, it was a shift in the gravity of the peak. I felt the stone pagoda beneath my feet groan and tilt. The air became heavy as lead, trying to crush me into the tiles. I slammed the butt of my naginata into the roof, anchoring myself with pure, focused chi. I am the mountain. I spat, blood leaking from my nose as the pressure intensified. I launched myself from the pagoda just as it shattered into a million pebbles. I was airborne, a white-robed shadow against the violet sky. I didn't fall toward the earth, I steered my momentum toward the Aeon-Eater. I spun Raikiri in a tight vertical circle, the blue lightning from the sutras creating a protective cage around me. The entity lashed out with metallic tentacles, tendrils of mercury that solidified into spears mid-air. I parried them with the rhythmic precision of a heartbeat. Clack, clack, clack. The impact sent shocks of freezing cold up my arms, but the blue fire held. I landed on one of the entity's rotating brass rings, my boots sliding on the polished, alien metal. Up close, the machine was a forest of ticking gears and whispering voices, thousands of stolen memories humming in a language of static. I saw the faces of the fallen monks flickering within the liquid eye, their spirits being processed into a cold, digital eternity. Not today. I drove the naginata into the gap between the rings, aiming for the central core. The blue lightning erupted from the blade, flooding the entity's internal systems. The Aeon-Eater shrieked, a sound that shattered the stone lanterns in the courtyard below and sent the monks to their knees. The mercury eye turned a frantic, bleeding red, and the rotation of the rings ceased. From the temple gates, a second swarm of drones emerged, these ones larger and shaped like jagged diamonds. They were the Reapers, and they were moving toward the high priest, who stood motionless in the center of the courtyard, his hands raised in a final, desperate mudra. Tenza, guard the gate. I yelled, though I was still clinging to the bucking, dying entity in the sky. Tenza, a monk of massive proportions, stepped forward with his iron tetsubo. He didn't have a magic blade, but he had the strength of the earth. He swung the club, shattering the diamond drones with a series of thunderous impacts that echoed through the canyons. He was a wall of muscle and faith, his skin scorched by the violet beams of the siphons, but he didn't give a single inch of the sacred soil. I turned my attention back to the master. I needed to finish it before the second Aeon-Eater arrived from the clouds. I pulled the naginata free and leaped again, this time aiming for the very center of the mercury eye. I didn't use strength. I used the silence I had found in 40 years of meditation. I became the void. The blade pierced the liquid eye. For a heartbeat, there was no sound. There was no light. There was only the feeling of 1,000 years of mountain history colliding with the hollow hunger of the stars. The mercury exploded in a supernova of white light, a shockwave of spiritual energy that swept across the peak of Mount High. It didn't destroy the temple, it cleansed it. The violet mist was blown away, and the mechanical lotus drones fell from the sky like dead leaves. The master entity disintegrated, its brass rings melting into a river of gold that flowed down the stone stairs of the monastery. I hit the ground in a crouch, my naginata smoking, my lungs heaving. The silence that returned was the true silence of the mountain, not the absence of sound but the presence of peace. I looked up at the sky. The violet clouds were receding, fleeing from the purity of the peak. Through the clearing mist, the first true stars of the morning began to twinkle, distant and cold, but no longer hungry. I looked at Tenza. He was leaning on his club, his breath visible in the freezing air. He looked at me and gave a single, shallow nod. We had held the peak. The world below was still burning and the ships were still dark shadows over Kyoto, but here, on the roof of the world, the light had not been harvested. I walked over to the edge of the cliff and sat down. I laid my naginata across my lap, the blue fire of the sutras fading back into the dark steel. I didn't pray for victory. I didn't pray for peace. I simply sat and breathed, feeling the mountain beneath me, solid and unmoving, a silent sentinel against the turning of the ages. The mist rolls over the broken stone, and the incense begins to rise once more from the ruined altars. The Iron Sutra remains, a shadow among the peaks, watching the horizon for the next flicker of the void. But for this hour the sky is empty. The mountain has spoken and the stars have listened. The peak is high. The breath is slow. The world remains. I close my eyes, and the sound of the mountain wind is the only sutra I need. The battle is over and the silence is a gift I will not waste. The stars may return but the stone is patient.